Good evening. My name is Philip Ware, and I'm going to be bringing the lesson dated August the 2nd, titled Faith and Wisdom. I have in my hands here my keys, and these keys give me success during my day. When I get ready to leave here, I'm going to need to be able to travel from this church back to my house. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to use the right key to get me there. When I get to my home, I'm going to have to choose the right key to let me into the house. And when I get to the house, I'm going to have to choose the right key to allow me to get into my safe deposit box. The key is that when you have the right key and you know how to use them, you can have success in your daily journey. In today's lesson, there are 4 keys that I've already identified in this lesson, and I want to share them with you on today. Today our lesson is titled Faith and Wisdom, and it comes from the book of James. And the lesson is divided up into 4 sections. The first section is to the despair, rejoice, joy in the midst of trials and difficulties, the way to wisdom, the poor shall be raised. In our first section, one of the keys that I found out is that when you study the Bible, the first thing you want to ask when you open up a text is that you want to find out who is the author, who is his audience, and what is the purpose of his writing. In James 1, James gives us a clear idea of who the author is. It's James himself. He calls himself a servant of God. Now James, who is James? James is the half-brother of Jesus Christ. Now, one thing that I noticed is that James didn't cling to that title of being half-brother of Jesus Christ. He used the title of servant. Seems like James said he was more honored to be a servant of God than to be the half-brother of Jesus. So we know that James is the author of this text. James is he's addressing the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Who are the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad? Well, they're the Jewish Christians, the Jewish people, and they were scattered as a result of when Stephen got martyred. When Stephen got martyred and there was attack on the followers of the way, the people of that region, they scattered and they went abroad. So James is writing this letter to the people who was abroad. So what was the reason for him writing it? Well, that's in verse 2. He says, "My brother, count it all joy when you fall into diverse situations or diverse temptation." The reason for him writing it, it seems as though he's writing it to encourage those brothers who were scattered abroad. One of the reasons why they needed to be encouraged because they was facing all kinds of trials and tribulations. They were attacked, they were ostracized, they were mistreated. So James penned this letter to address his brothers who were scattered abroad, to give them some words of encouragement. That's the first key that I see in this lesson, is that when you get ready to study the Bible, you want to find out who's the author, you want to find out who's his audience, and you want to find out the purpose for his writing. And we've done that in the first 2 verses. Now, what is it that he wants to, how is he going to encourage those brothers who were suffering, who was abroad, who was scattered? He was sharing with them. In verse 3, it says, "Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience, but let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing." One of the things I found out is that in the Japanese language, there is no word for crisis. They do have a word called opportunity. So when a Japanese person hears the word crisis, or they're in a crisis, or they see a crisis, they don't use the word crisis, they use the word opportunity. And James in this text is showing us to do the same thing. Whenever there's a trial or tribulation that we're facing, we don't need to look at it as a trial or a crisis. We need to look at it as an opportunity. An opportunity to do what? And he said, for an opportunity to let your patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. That's the second key that I see in this text. Count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptation, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Whenever you go through a trial and tribulation, don't look at it as a trial. Don't look at it as a crisis. Look at it as an opportunity. Why is that? Because it has an opportunity for your faith to grow. One of the things that allows us to get our faith to grow is to go through a trials and tribulation. And once you know that that trial is not to harm you, but to make you better, then you can be patient in the midst of it. One of the things that we want to find out, one of the things that we want to do when we go through a trial is to be patient. Now, a lot of people short circuit the testing, the time to let their faith grow because they get, excuse me, impatient, and they cut the work that the trial is trying to do in half because they get impatient. They move before it's time. But James gives us instruction, which is another one of the keys, to be patient in this time of testing. Why? So that patient will have a perfect work, and that you may be perfect and entire and wanting nothing. The whole goal of the trial, the difficulty, the persecution is to make you more like Jesus. One of the things I found out in the Purpose Driven Life campaign that we had in the church was that the trial is my friend. Rick Warren told me, and I keep this ever before me, is that every time I face a trial, I look at it, it's just a test. It's just a test. And the test is to make me more like Jesus. So the second key that I want to point out in this lesson is that when a trial comes into your situation, when a situation or crisis come up in your life, don't look at it as a crisis. Don't look at it as a trial. Look at it as opportunity. Amen. The third key that I want to point out is that if he jumps from verse 4, when he talks about the trials, he goes to verse 5, and now his attention is on how do you gain wisdom. It says in verse 5, if you lack wisdom, let him ask of God that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, not wavering, for he that wavereth is like the wave of a sea, driven from the wind and tossed. The third key that I see in this lesson is how do you gain wisdom? If you want to gain wisdom, it's as simple as just asking. If you lack wisdom, James tells us just act. Just act. And not only do you just ask, but there's a way that you ask. You have to ask in faith, not wavering. One of the things that I found out is that the word for wavering or doubt in Greek conveys the idea of a person debating with himself. His mind is not made up. Now that reminds me of me in my early stages, when I was wavering about when I was going to pay the tithes or what I was going to buy me a suit. I had my tithe money in this hand. I had my suit catalog in this hand, and I was debating, should I pay my tithes or should I get this suit? And I had to struggle with that. But I've come and realized that the key to having success and to be financial free is that you have to bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. That's one of the things I learned. That's a key that I've learned. If you want God to open up the windows of heaven, pay your tithes. And James says that if you are wavering and if you have doubt, you can't expect to get anything from God. He said if you want wisdom, all you have to do is just ask. The fourth key that I see in this lesson on today, it says in verse number 9 and 10, his address is to the brothers of low degrees, rejoice. He says in verse 9, he said, let the brother of low degrees rejoice in that he is exalted, but the rich in that he is made low, because of the flower of the grass he shall pass away. For the sun is no longer risen with a burning heat, but it is withered the grass, and the flower thereof falleth, and the grace of the fashion of the perish, and also shall the rich man fade away in his way. Now the question is, how can a man of low degree rejoice in the midst of a trialous situation? James addresses his brothers who are oppressed, who are going through trials and tribulation, who are being ostracized. His address is to them. And his address, his words, his keys to get them to a point of rejoicing is that they have to look and see who they belong to. I think the key that James is trying to give his audience and to give to us is that you shouldn't let nobody else determine what your value is. You shouldn't give anybody the resources or the power to determine who you are in Christ. James tells his brothers who are of low degrees that your identity and your self-worth comes from God and God alone. He said God has favor to the man who is poor. Why is that? Because the poor are totally dependent upon God, whereas those who are of high esteem, those who are rich, are more dependent upon their wealth and on their resources and stuff. God says, for you who are lowly, you can rejoice in knowing that you belong to God. And if you belong to God, God says that you are above and not beneath. You are the lender and not the borrower. You are the head and not the tail. So the key to getting past your economical status in life, the key to that is who are you listening to? Are you going to listen to the naysayers? Are you going to listen to the world? Or are you going to listen to God? That's the gist of this lesson right here. James writes this letter to give his audience some words of encouragement. And what are the 4 keys that he gives us in this lesson? Well, if you want to have success in studying the Bible, you need to ask those questions. Who is the author? Who is his audience? And what is the message that he's trying to convey? If you want your faith to grow, don't look at a trial as a crisis. You look at a trial and a tribulation as an opportunity for your faith to grow. It's all about your perspective. And if you want to have more wisdom, it says if you want to have faith, he said just let him ask of God. That's all you have to do. And if you want to get past what people think about you or how they treat you, don't look at what people say about you. You look at what God has to say about you. Thank you.